Hi everyone, it's Vicky here and welcome back to another one of my 1 kit 10 cards videos, and today I'm playing with the SSS Stamp September card kit, so let's start by taking a look on what's included. First of all, you get a die. These are two dies actually, the Hello Sentiment along with its outline. There is a 3D embossing folder as well, and it is one of those designs that are really versatile. It can be used throughout the year no matter the theme or the occasion of your card. This month it is packed with products, so you get all those tiny little foam squares, really handy to have in your craft room. You will also get this blending brush, and it has a cup as well. It's one of those very soft brush blending tools, and of course it is fun when you get one of those tools in a kit because you get a chance to play with it and decide if you find it handy. Now in the kit you will also get a distress crayon. Mine is a brown one, but I have the feeling that everyone gets a different color. You'll also get a sanding disc. This is one where you can place it on one of your blending tools, like so. It just grabs there, and now you can use it to sand out the edges or even over some embossed areas to bring out the design. And then let's take a look at the stencil this month. This is a set of stencils that you layer one on top of the other, use different colors on every stencil, and you end up with a lovely flower composition, sunflowers with tiny little flowers all around. Hopefully you can see that. And of course you don't have to use them all, you can use just the sunflower or just use the surrounding background. Just play with it and decide what you want to do. And here are the 6x6 pattern papers. I will be using all of them in today's projects. And you can see it is yellow themed with sunflowers and bees, and you will also find some adorable gnomes as well. I find that it has lovely designs that you can really easily turn them into cards. Plus you get those 2 pages, and these are already cut out for you. All you need to do is just pop them out very carefully so that you don't tear them. There are a few tabs on each design, and these are perfect focal points for your cards. I will be using most of them on my cards today. And then take a look at the stamp set. Again, 3 layers where you can build your own sunflowers, a lovely background for the bees. These are the 3 layers, many sentiments. I will be using this stamp set a lot on this video as well. And finally, a white and a black cardstock. The black one is shiny. And let's start with the first card for today. I will be using 3 of the 4 stencils included. From the third stencil I'm only going to use the centers for the flowers, so I'm not going for the background, just for the flowers, the sunflowers on the stencil. I do have my white panel there, and I'm using the sticky mat by Waffle Flower. I find it super handy to hold stencils and paper on my surface without using any masking tape at all. Now I'm trying to align the image that I want to use on top of my panel, and as you can see I hold all the stencils together just to make sure that the flowers and the stems and everything is going to fall exactly where I need to. Now I'm going to do some ink blending really quickly, and this card design is very easy to mass produce if you want to create many cards at once, and you will see that I'm not even going to use lots of colors. Here I'm using my dye ink pad, and the color is warm yellow from my own collection with Stamperia. And I'm using a blending brush. I'm oversaturating mainly where the center of the sunflowers is. For the stems and the leaves I'm using fresh green. Again, this is from my own Stamperia collection ink pads, and this is from the brand new collection that has just been released. It's a new color. And again, I'm not going for the perfect blending where all the areas have the same saturation. You see I have darker and lighter areas, and I feel like this makes the design really interesting. I always wipe off my stencil before I remove it from my surface, and then I'm going to move on to the third and last stencil for this design so that I can add the center of the sunflowers. This time I'm using coffee. Also notice that this time I'm not going with a blending brush. I switched into a finger dabber just because I get more control of exactly where I'm applying the ink. just because there are open areas close by that I don't want to use. So my main design is now ready. And it's time to do some stamping directly on top with black ink. I'm going to use one of the sentiments from the stamp set included, and for that I'm using my Misty just to make sure that I get a good impression. And of course you see I'm not using any magnets anymore on my Misty because I have the sticky mat by Waffle Flower that lives in my Misty from now on. And for some unknown reason I always like to stamp my sentiment twice, even if I get a good impression from the first time. Now I have foam tape at the back. I'm going to place it on top of a yellow card base to match the color of my petals. And now this is another product from my latest collection. It is a contouring liner, which is really helpful to add dots, lines, or really free forms. You can create borders, whatever you like. It is a very fine tip, and the good thing of having the product inside a tube instead of a bottle is that it is not difficult to squeeze the product out, plus you will be able to use every bit of it inside that tube. You will find it in 4 different colors. I'm using old gold or copper, so it matches lovely with the center of my flowers, and hopefully you can see it better here. All the cards today are really easy to recreate, otherwise I wouldn't be able to fit 10 different card designs in one video. So let's move on to the second card. And when I have lovely designs like this paper, I like to bring in a rectangle die, and I play with it whether I want to use this image vertically or horizontally. I can move it around and see how it frames, and then I will go ahead and cut it out. And it doesn't get any easier than that. I'm going to use one of the pieces that was included in one of the cut apart papers and the pop-up papers, and I'm going to stick it on top. This is going to add a little bit of dimension, so it makes the card more interesting since it is already very plain. If you want to add more dimension, you can fuzzy cut some sunflowers and stick them on top of the already made composition of sunflowers just to add more dimension. However, I'm going to leave it as it is, really plain and super simple. I did use one of the ready-made printout sentiments that I had in my stash, and I'm going to stick it down. I'll place that with foam tape at the back on top of a yellow card base. And from the set of my contouring liners, I'm going to use the iridescent one so that I can add little dots at the center of the sunflowers. I like to go with 3 on most of them. It's a little touch of highlight that brings the sunflowers more into life, plus it adds a little bit of shine. And here is a close-up. Don't be afraid to create a very simple card when you have beautiful designs like this one. Use the papers that you have, don't keep them in your stash, and make simple cards. Now for the next card, I'm using this lovely yellow background paper. Also, don't throw away any leftovers. I'm going to use them as well. Now, I am going to place that on top of a standard card that's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and you see it is slightly smaller, so I get a lovely white border. And now I'm going to pop out some images. Actually, I did pop them all out so that I can easily go through them and audition them on top of my card, decide which one I want to use. For this card, I'm going with a bunch of daisies. So I have foam tape at the back of my panel, and I have foam tape at the back of my daisies, and I'm going to place one on top of the other. By the way, my neighbor is mowing the lawn. I hope it's not bothering you, but I need to do the video now so that I will be able to upload the video today. Now the sentiment is a thank you from this stamp set, but I didn't use the second row. And I'm going to finish off my card by adding some dots with my gold contour liner. Again, a very simple card, but it works for any occasion depending on the sentiment that you choose to stamp. Now from this card I do have some scraps, so for the next card I'm going to use the scrap. As you can see here, I'm going to stamp a sentiment at the very bottom of my scrap, and then I am going to create a little cluster with those cutout images that I have. So I picked some that have to do with the honey. You can see I have 2 tools as well as the honey jar. And I do have some foliage and flowers to embellish it. Now I'm going to create my cluster, try to decide how it looks better, and once I'm happy, I'm going to stick it down. For some of the elements I did use foam squares at the back to pop them up, for others I just used glue. I'm also planning to stick that cutout that looks like a wax seal right there, but before I do that I'm going to wrap a string a few times just to add some extra something, a little bit of texture and interest. So I'm going to wrap it around 3 or 4 times. I'm going to secure it at the back and then I will stick the wax seal on top. When I am creating clusters, I always make sure that when I stick them down I don't press the adhesive too much, because there is always a chance to change my mind and I want to align things kind of differently. But once I'm happy I can also apply some pressure and then it's going to stay put. Now for this panel, the whole panel, I'm going to use foam tape at the back and then stick it on top of my card base. Again, my card base is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And when you have ephemeras or cutout images of any kind, it is always a great idea to create kind of a cluster with all the elements, add a sentiment and you're good to go without having to do a very difficult composition. Again, I'm adding some shine with my contour liner, and this is the gold color. And here are some close-up photos. For the next card, I'm going to give it a little bit of a mixed media look and feel, so I'm starting with a simple white panel. I'm making up on top some of my yellow warm color, and I'm not going to cover it up completely. I'm also going to apply some splatters, again with the same color, diluted with a little bit of water. This is dye ink, so it is really easy to do all these techniques. And then from the stamp set I picked this lovely background stamp, and I'm going to do some stamping again using the same ink. You will see that it looks completely different when you stamp rather than when you blend, because now the color is more saturated. I'm also going to stamp that on another area, just randomly. I don't know exactly where I'm going to stick my focal points, I just want to have something interesting at the back. And since I have my Misty out, I'm going to stamp my sentiment directly on top of that, and all that's left to do is to add some dimension to create a little bit of a cluster with all the cutouts that I have on my desk. And for this card I chose to go just with sunflowers. I am going to pop them, some of them, on top of my card by using foam tape at the back, and you see I like to use the big roll of foam tape because I'm very frugal with the tiny foam screws that were included in the kit. I like to keep them for very delicate and small cutouts. So now I'm going to grab my scissors, I will chop off any excess. Stick that on top of your card base and you are good to go. You can see here some close-up photos, and of course you can embellish this card with some gems, pearls, whatever you have. This is definitely one of my favorites from the set of 10 cards from today. Let me know in the comments below after you finish the video which one was your favorite. So now let's use some of those images for some of the cards. I'm going to cut them apart. And then I picked 4 images of those little rectangles and I added some foam squares at the back. I'm going to align them on top of a standard card that's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And you can either place them like so they take up the whole card, or you can place them closer to each other and just chop off a part of the card underneath, or you can use that space to stamp your sentiment. Now for this card I chose to stick them more closer to each other, and I'll just use my paper trimmer and chop off the bottom part. So just really eyeballing it, nothing is perfectly straight here, but you can definitely use your T-ruler and make sure that everything is nicely aligned. Now again, for your sentiment you can either use any ready-made ones that you have, you can stamp one from the stamp set that is included in the kit. I chose to go with one that is already made, it's again from SSS Stamp. If you notice, I cut apart the sentiment and I placed it in different areas, and there are foam tapes underneath, so it is a little bit raised. And to add that extra something, I did use my contour liner in iridescent color. And here I switched to gold so that I can add some dots at the center of the flowers. Just keep in mind that a lovely card doesn't have to be very complicated. Sometimes we are overthinking things and we end up not using our supplies. And let's move on to the next card and let's make a window card. This is a great design when you have a very busy pattern paper. So I'm going to cut this to be slightly smaller than the standard card, and then I'm going to use a circle on top of it to cut out a window. And then I'm going to use the circle that is the exact next one on the set of circles so that I can place one inside the other and I can create a ring. I chose to go with brown so that I can match the color with the brown at the center of my sunflowers. So this is a ring which I am going to stick around the circle and it's going to help that pop even more. I think it gives a more finished look on a window card. So I'm going to place that panel on top of my card base, and I do have foam squares at the back, you know that I love dimension. And then inside the window you can stick any of the elements that you have already in the bunch of cutouts. I decided to go with one of the gnomes just because they are just adorable, so I'm going to fuzzy cut him and just stick him inside the window. There is a white border all around as I cut it out, which is going to blend nicely with the background inside the circle, so don't be afraid to cut it out. It doesn't have to be perfect, it's not going to show that much because the background is the same color as the border. And since the gnome has some tiny little areas, this is the perfect space to use the tiny little foam squares, and I'm going to tuck him behind the window. And then on top of that, I'm going to add a couple of flowers as well as a banner where I'm going to stamp the word hello. Now the hello comes from another stamp set. I was trying to find a very tiny sentiment that would fit on top of that banner. So again, tiny squares, foam squares at the back of the banner, put it in place and then embellish that with some fuzzy cut flowers on each side of the banner. This adds extra dimension, it helps the composition pop even more, and it makes it look more interesting. And of course you don't have to stop here, you can add some highlights at the center of the flowers like I'm doing here. You can use gems, sequins, whatever your heart desires. Now for today's video I'm on a mission to use all the pattern papers included in the kit, so there is another one that gives you a lovely scene, not much that you need to do with this beautiful design. So all I'm going to do is to just cut out a panel, and I'm going to go for a vertical card for this design. So this panel is 3.5 by 5.5, and I'm going to place it on top of my card base towards the top. This is going to give me a lovely space at the bottom to stamp my sentiment. On card designs like this one, I always like to have a very thin strip of paper between the two papers, like so. So for this one I chose to go with yellow because it brings more the color of the sunflower, of course. It matches perfectly with the rest of the design, and I'm going to add some double-sided tape at the back and stick it there so that it shows just the hair at the front. Again, this is one of those super simple cards that you can put in seconds. I am going to place that on my panel. The panel is 4.25 by 5.5 and stamp my sentiment at the bottom. Now in the bunch of cutouts I do have a bee which I'm going to stick with foam squares at the back, so I add some extra dimension on my design, and I'm going to leave it as it is. You can add gems again, sequins to embellish it if you like, and here are some close-up photos. And of course, in a set of 10 cards, we need to have at least one shaker card. So I am going to use the wreath and a ring. I am going to align exactly where I need that window to be. I will run it through my die cutting machine to cut out the window. And then the process is quite easy. I'm going to cut a piece of acetate that I can use at the back. For this I like to use double-sided tape at the back of the acetate so that it is nice and clean, it doesn't slide as I stick it down. It's always a struggle to stick acetate without making a mess. And then I'm just going to peel it off and stick it down. Now on top of that you need to use foam tape. For that you can either go with a big roll of foam tape, or if you have those very thin strips, these are by Waffle Flower by the way, you can go ahead and add a circle with that. If you peel them off you will find that it is really easy to manipulate and go around the circle easier. So for this card I decided to go with a yellow card base. I'm adding some golden sequins where this window is going to fall. And usually with the shaker cards you don't have to go very complicated. After all, there is that element of surprise for the recipient, so even if you keep it simple, it's going to give a lovely look. Now you can see here I have trapped the sequins in there. And then I'm going to embellish that window with the wreath that I have. And of course you can use glue to stick that directly around the circle, or if you want, and of course you can use glue to stick the wreath around your window, which is going to lay completely flat, or if you're like me and you cannot stay away from your foam tape, then just use that. And of course we need to add a sentiment. This is one from the stamp set included in the kit. I did stamp that and cut it out with one of the banners that I have in my stash. And I'm also going to add a touch of cuteness in this card by using this gnome that I fuzzy cut, and I'm just going to stick it there. Of course I had to embellish it with some golden dots with my new contour liners. You can tell that I'm absolutely obsessed with them. They are so handy to use. And then finally, the last card for today, number 10, I'm creating a white panel by using this embossing folder. This is going to give you a lovely background which is going to have texture and a lovely interest at the background, but at the same time is going to be very subtle since it is white. So this is going to be my focal point. I'm going to cut it in half. Just eyeball it, cut it in half, be brave here. It is going to give you the opportunity to make it bigger when you place it on top of your card, and I'll show you how. Just bring in a sentiment that you have stamped on a strip of paper, and this is about 1 inch height, and then you can place your cutouts at the top and at the bottom. And you see here I am just auditioning how all the elements are going to show, and this is where I decided that I want to give some extra touch on this sentiment to help it stand out a little bit more. That's why I'm going to mat it with yellow cardstock. Just stick it there and cut it out to make sure that it is slightly bigger. And here is how it looks when you put everything together. Again, this is one of those cards that go on top of my favorites from this set of 10 cards. And you can see here some close-up photos on the last card for today, as well as on all the 10 cards that I made. I hope that you had fun, that you got inspired. Just like always, links to all the products that I used can be found down below in the description. Thank you all so much for joining me today, and I'll see you all next time.